Hello there. Now, I have some wonderful news that you will not want to miss. And I'm sure the mainstream press will get around to mentioning it to you at some point or other. Only those with traditional far-right values and those who think that men and women are somehow inherently different will consider what I'm about to tell you as dystopian. And that news is that the body that governs our human rights has published a wonderful, updated issue paper making some far-reaching recommendations. Changes are in the pipeline. Changes that you cannot argue with. Amongst the recommendations of this august body is adopt robust laws and policies to ensure that everyone can take part in sports without discrimination or harassment due to actual or perceived gender identity and gender expression. Now, who could possibly argue with that? And to back it up, so as to give it teeth, the paper goes on to say, national policies governing participation in sports should start from a position where trans people can participate according to their gender identity. So the starting point for sport will be that trans people must be allowed to participate where they wish as of default. Something that would require someone, somewhere, to argue against it. For example, if they were saying they want to protect women from harm in physical sport. I wish them luck with that one, given the self-righteous ferocity of a certain lobby. Lots of angry masked men, I gather. Just ask J.K. Rowling and Sharon Davies about that. Oh, and you won't be able to argue against this, because that would presumably be a hate crime. And I doubt that any credence would be given to arguing that the chances of someone born female winning competitions would be reduced, because it would be claimed that women, even if self-identified, are still winning the medals. And women's sport will, of course, thrive as a result. More records will be broken. And in football or rugby, for example, they would end up facing a situation where there are two elite sectors. One for the elite men, and one for the men who can't make the grade amongst the elite men. How wonderful for female equal rights, eh? Can't come a moment too soon. Just look at the case of the Flying Bats female football team in Sydney, Australia. They fielded a team which included 5 trans players into a female soccer competition, and they won extremely easily. In fact, it was a doddle for them. Just shows the strength of inclusivity, doesn't it? But it ended with parents of female players on the other teams refusing to let their girls participate for fear of them coming to harm. And those parents were inevitably labelled by some as bigoted and far right. As if playing against trans athletes would ever result in women and girls being badly injured. I mean, we're all meant to be exactly the same and equal, aren't we? Oh, and any team that refused to play against the Flying Bats was under threat of facing disciplinary action on the basis of discrimination. And it's not as if those born female will be forced out of elite sport. Is it? The Olympics could become a male-born-only affair, but with half being defined as women. Marvellous, eh? And here's another one from the issue paper for the concerned far-right parents out there. Recognise the identity of trans school-aged children and students in school settings, regardless of their legal gender or sex, including by allowing them to use their own names and pronouns, dress as they wish, and participate in sports and other activities according to their gender identity and expression. There's going to be no hiding place. Then there's this recommendation for the extremely important matter of lavatories. Ensure that in both public and private locations, everyone is able to use sanitation facilities in a dignified and safe manner according to their gender identity when these are gender segregated. As far as possible, ensure the presence of an all-gender inclusive option. Why should women have any issue with shared loos? You have to wonder why we've always had separate facilities, don't you? And the Office for National Statistics is already signed up to this. Yes, if colleagues persistently refuse to share facilities, they can be dealt with via grievance and disciplinary procedures, reports The Telegraph. And the Human Rights Issue paper also says that we must ensure that trans refugees, asylum seekers and migrants have access to safe reception conditions, trans-specific healthcare services and legal gender recognition. A little difficult when all we do seem to get is a huge number of very masculine-looking, fighting-age men arriving on our shores. And how about this one on arrest and prisons? Unless they disagree, trans people should, in principle, be detained in accordance with their gender identity. I thought the experiment with that in Scotland had failed. Well, I'm sure they'll get it right the next time. Now, this isn't just about people who've been through any specific medical procedure. Oh no, because the paper also says, recognise actual or perceived gender identity and gender expression explicitly as prohibited grounds of discrimination in anti-discrimination legislation covering all fields of life and as aggravating factors in anti-hate speech and hate crime legislation. And it's all about protecting the human rights of women. So those awful TERF cis women will just have to suck it up, won't they? Now, the human rights organisation that came out with this thing it calls an issue paper is the Council of Europe. Not to be confused with the European Union, but the same Council of Europe that controls the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR, and its courts. That's the body that shapes human rights in its 46 member states, including the United Kingdom. The body that houses the judges that ensure nobody can be deported for just about any reason. The body that our lefty woke socialists are so keen for us to remain a member of. Well, given this issue paper, I can see why. The body that Keir Starmer's Labour Party will avidly support and then obey their every diktat. I'm sure that Labour will be enacting these recommendations into UK law at the first available opportunity. Can't wait. And I'm sure the Scots will be benefiting from these new rights authored by the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, Commissioner Dunja Mijatovic, very, very shortly, when their new hate crime laws come into effect in 2 days' time on the 1st of April 2024. Expect action. The dawning of a new age where schools turn out well-rounded, balanced and mature theys and thems of the future. Nothing can go wrong. But surely this will fly in the face of the protected belief that you believe it's a scientific fact that you are either born a male or born a female and that nothing can change that. And even that it is an immutable scientific and medical fact. Or is that currently protected in law gender-critical belief about to be dropped in favour of some people's feelings? Now, interestingly, within the same month that this trans issue paper was produced, the Council of Europe actually issued guidance that will make it easier for the UK government to deport people to Rwanda. Yes, you heard me right. Those opposing Rishi Sunak's Rwanda plan will find it harder to get an ECHR judge to block the flights. because the ECHR has actually toughened up the requirements for those seeking to block deportation flights to Rwanda. Now, I wonder if that was done as quid pro quo on the understanding that the UK will then be signing up to the recommendations of this newly uprated issue paper on trans. Or am I being cynical? Oh, and the men-only Garrick Club and the University Women's Club had both better shape up too. And as for those saying we should leave the ECHR and go our own way on human rights,